Hello everyone, tonight we venture into the heart of an empire that worshipped blood, feared the sky, and stacked skulls like bricks in a temple courtyard. You stand at the edge of Tenochtitlan, just as twilight spills gold across the canals. The water smells faintly of salt and smoke, and the causeways glimmer with torchlight. Somewhere drums begin to throb a heartbeat for a city of 100,000 souls. You haven't yet noticed the tower, but soon you will. You walk as if sleepwalking past traders rolling out woven mats, children chasing each other between reed boats, old women blessing cornmeal with quick whispered prayers. The temples loom above you, massive white pyramids with stairways that pierce the heavens. Every angle of the city is sharp, intentional, glowing with sacred geometry. But there's something else. Behind one of the temples, half in shadow, rises a shape that defies easy explanation. A wall, monument. No, it's made of skulls. Yes, human skulls. Dozens, hundreds. Their empty sockets somehow manage to look judgmental. You can feel them noticing you. You weren't expecting them. You came for history, maybe a little mystery. But this is something else. You probably won't survive this story. But you're already here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's falling asleep across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your walk at the edge of the Great Causeway, where the reeds whisper and the air is thick with humidity. It's 1502, and Tenochtitlan is humming with quiet energy. You're just in time for the coronation of Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, whom you'll come to know as Moctezuma II. He is 34, solemn, and already walking with a pronounced limp from a childhood illness or accident. No one agrees exactly which. Historians still argue whether it was polio, a genetic condition, or simply the result of a long-healed bone infection. Whatever the truth, he walks like, the world weighs more on one side of him. You slip into the crowd, gathering around the base of the Templo Mayor. Flute music weaves through the air, soft and haunting. Priests in jaguar skins move like ghosts between enormous braziers. The smoke smells sweet and bitter, at once copal resin, a divine offering. And then you see him. Moctezuma is dressed in shimmering turquoise mosaic and gold. He does not wave to the crowd. His eyes scan the horizon like someone constantly listening to voices no one else hears. Behind him, a priest holds a dagger. Blood stains the blade. They've already sacrificed 4 captives this morning. Moctezuma does not flinch. You wonder if the limp gave him empathy or cruelty. Perhaps both. As he turns to face the people, his chin lifts not in arrogance, but in a kind of studied detachment. He's a man watching himself from the outside. You can almost hear him thinking, you are the chosen one. You cannot afford doubt. You must walk even when it hurts. Nearby, a boy in a feathered headdress is whispering to his brother, pointing toward a skull embedded in a wall behind the temple. That's where we all go if we disobey, he hisses. The brother nods solemnly. Neither of them laughs. You follow Moctezuma into the palace later that evening. He limps slightly, yet with such grace that it becomes a kind of royal rhythm. A priest offers him pulque in a carved gourd, but he declines. Instead, he turns to an obsidian mirror on the wall and stares. His reflection warps and splits in the stone. He doesn't blink. Historians still argue whether Moctezuma believed he could see the future in these dark mirrors, or merely use them to practice the art of silence. But something happened that first night as emperor. He walked alone through the courtyard, stopping at the Huaytzompantli, the great skull rack. He stood there for over an hour just staring at it. No guards, no advisors, just him and the dead. Some say he was communing with the gods. Others claim he was measuring the structure, imagining it taller. You're starting to understand now this story isn't about madness. It's about method. Pain sharpened his senses. And when a man walks with pain every day, he learns how to make the world limp too. And so you stand in the center of the world, an island city built on sacred dreams and dread, where gods demand blood and emperors dream in bones. You try to look away from the skull tower, but its gaze is relentless. Because tonight is only the beginning. You wake the next morning, still in the dream, still in Tenochtitlan, as golden sunlight climbs over the lake and strikes the white stone temples like a blessing or a warning. The city is alive, swaying gently on its chinampas, those floating gardens that feed an empire. You're standing in the palace courtyard now, just beyond the quiet splashing of fish ponds and the rustle of parrot feathers in the trees. But it's not the garden that captures your attention. It's the young boy limping down the hallway, determined not to fall. Moctezuma still a prince, then no crown, no bloodied stairs, no skull towers yet. Just a boy with one leg shorter than the other, teeth clenched in concentration as he walks without assistance. Around him, courtiers pretend not to notice the limp. The Aztecs prized symmetry and perfection. A crooked walk could be seen as weakness, or worse, an omen. His nurse walks behind him, barely breathing. She knows not to help unless asked. Moctezuma doesn't ask. You watch him cross the hallway in full ceremonial dress, child-sized sandals and embroidered cloak, a small turquoise pendant bouncing against his chest. He keeps going, past the fountain, past the priests, past the giant stone serpent with its mouth eternally open. The only sound is the tap, drag, tap, drag of his uneven gait. He turns a corner and disappears into the temple's cool shadow. Historians still argue whether this limp haunted him or honed him. In Aztec society, physical impairment wasn't always pitied. In some myths, the gods themselves were wounded. Tezcatlipoca had only one leg. It had been bitten off by a sea monster, or so the stories went. The limp might have marked Moctezuma as sacred or cursed. No one dared say which. You follow him into a schoolroom carved into the temple wall, where children learn sacred songs and calendar glyphs. His tutor, a stern old man with a painted jaw, is reciting Nahuatl poetry, while the boys chanted back. Moctezuma stays silent, watching, absorbing, always observing first. Later at dinner, he sits with his uncle's general's priests, men who smell like stone and fire. One of them jokes about battle scars. The others laugh, lifting their tunics to show half-healed wounds. Moctezuma lifts nothing, just stares at his own ankle twisted slightly inward, then at the man's scar. A different kind of damage, a different kind of offering. That night, he doesn't sleep. You follow him out to the gardens where he limps between moonlit flowers. There, standing beside a statue of Huitzilopochtli, the sun god who demanded hearts to keep rising each day, Moctezuma stares into the sky, and he prays. But not like the others. Not aloud, not with words. Just standing, breathing, letting the pain in his leg remind him he's still alive. That the gods haven't claimed him yet. He begins to build something that night. Not with stone, but with thought. You see him kneeling by the edge of the pond, pushing pebbles into spirals. A tower of them. A little ring of white ones at the base. Skulls in miniature. The fish scatter. And you realize he's not dreaming of temples. He's dreaming of structures made not from stone, but from people. His pain has turned inward, yes, but it's also reaching out. Somewhere behind you, the drums begin again, low and slow. You walk back into the palace, passing murals of gods, flaying humans, warriors, holding hearts like trophies. You pass dancers practicing steps for a future ceremony, maybe a wedding, maybe a sacrifice. They don't stop when you pass. You're not really here after all. But the boy sees you. Just for a second, his eyes flick to yours. And then he turns away. You keep walking and find yourself in a long hallway lined with obsidian mirrors. Each one holds a warped reflection. One shows you older. One shows you with golden skin. One shows you with your face gone. You shiver and turn. And there he is again. Moctezuma staring into the final mirror. But this time the reflection isn't his. It's someone older, more haunted. It's him, but wearing a crown. Historians still argue whether this vision truly changed him, or whether he had always known he would rule, and that ruling meant breaking something sacred. Outside the skull rack still hasn't been built, but the space for it has. A clean rectangle of courtyard swept twice daily, as if waiting for its true purpose. As you drift towards sleep or deeper into the dream, you see the boy limping back across the stone shoulders, stiff fists curled. And behind him, just for a moment, you swear the statue of Tezcatlipoca smile. You rise early if one can rise in a dream, just as the city begins to stir with muted footsteps and bird calls. The mist still lingers over the lake, blurring the horizon between water and sky. The people of Tenochtitlan begin their morning rituals. Corn is groundwater drawn from Chinampa's prayers offered to the rising sun. But your attention, as ever, is pulled upward. There it is, the city itself. Tenochtitlan, radiant and terrible. From the causeways, you can see it all, whitewashed temples layered like steps toward heaven. Plazas humming with ceremony canals that shimmer like veins. You float, not literally, though it feels that way through the marketplaces and alleys, and always the scent of stone blood and flowers. But it's not the beauty that haunts you. It's the hidden teeth. You turn a corner near the ceremonial plaza and freeze. It's there. A wall, no, a structure wide and low, made not from adobe or limestone, but from skulls. Human skulls. Carefully cleaned, still bearing the delicate contours of noses, jaws, eye sockets. Each one pierced cleanly through and slid onto a horizontal beam like meat on a spit. These beams are stacked atop each other, forming a lattice. The effect is disarming. There's symmetry, yes, mathematical precision, but also madness. You count without meaning too. 1, 2, 30, 73. But you stop. Because counting skulls is like counting stars. You either lose track or lose your mind. This, you're told, is at Tzompantli. Specifically the Hui Tzompantli, the Great Skull Rack. There are smaller ones elsewhere. But this is the main artery of horror, right next to the Templo Mayor. A public proclamation. It's here that Moctezuma's empire makes its quietest, loudest statement. This is what we do to feed the gods. And this is how we remember you. You step closer and realize that some of the skulls are not ancient. They're fresh. Their teeth are still white. You feel your stomach tighten. The Aztecs believed the gods had created humanity through blood, and that only blood could sustain creation. Each skull here is both memorial and fuel. And the structure, well, the structure is not merely decorative. It is architectural theology. Historians still argue whether the Tzompantli was meant to terrorize, commemorate, or sanctify. Maybe all three, maybe none. But Moctezuma, he saw something else in it. You recall him as a boy building towers of pebbles in moonlight. Now a man, he builds them in daylight, and not from stone, but from lives. He orders the Huitzompantli expanded, more racks, better support beams, carvings in the base to honor specific gods. The engineers argue it's unsustainable, they say. The wood warps, the skulls decay. Moctezuma listens, then speaks softly, then make it taller before they rot. You wander through the construction zone because that's what it is now. Priests and workers dragging the dead like stone blocks, craftsmen scraping flesh from bone, artists, not the kind who sketch birds, but the kind who decorate horror. They paint symbols on jawbones, inscribe prayers into the occipital bones. One man arranges the skulls by size, another by expression. You overhear someone joking, the ones that scream are lightest. No one laughs. You hear the drums again, always the drums. At night, you sneak back. The Tzompantli now casts a longer shadow. Lit by torchlight, it flickers like a breathing thing. You walk beside it and notice something unnerving. Some skulls are tilted slightly upward, as if they're still watching the stars. And you begin to see the city differently. Every building has a face. Every step echoes with something once alive. The temples are no longer neutral, they're mouths. Open, waiting. You sleep on a rooftop that night, curled under a woolen cloak, eyes fixed on the heavens. Above you, constellations twist serpents, jaguars, hummingbirds with knives for wings. The sky feels too close. You close your eyes, but the skulls remain, and when you dream from inside one. You're not sure what wakes you. A breeze, a whisper, but when you sit up, Moctezuma is below you alone, once again, staring at the Tzompantli. He holds something in his hands, a small obsidian blade, for war, for sacrifice. He doesn't speak, just kneels, places the blade on the ground, and presses his forehead to the base of the rack. You hear him whisper one word, balance. And in that moment, you understand. The empire isn't just built on violence. It's built on the belief that without violence, the world collapses. And the man who limps, he doesn't flinch at pain, he organizes it. Tomorrow, he will sacrifice 50 more captives. He will walk beside the Tzompantli and nod at the priests who string fresh skulls like garlands. He will ask for more space. A second tower, maybe. Then a third. You still don't know if he's mad. But you're starting to admire the symmetry. It's nearly dawn when you walk again along the canal's edge, where frogs croak half-heartedly, and the scent of damp soil clings to the air like a warning. But your path today curves upward toward the heart of something stranger than death belief. You're guided, though no one holds your hand, through a narrow passage beneath the base of the Templo Mayor. The steps are steep, carved, unevenly lit by flickering oil lamps. The stones sweat in the humid air, as though the temple itself is nervous. And then you enter the chamber. It isn't large, but it's loud. Not with sound, but with presence. Symbols are everywhere, painted in ochre and obsidian, carved into stone, etched into clay bowls and ceremonial knives. Here the feathered serpent reigns, Quetzalcoatl, god of wind learning and resurrection. You don't expect this softness in the Aztec pantheon. Not after skull towers and blood-slicked stairs. But Quetzalcoatl, this swirling serpent crowned in feathers, is different. He abhors human sacrifice. At least, that's one version. The Aztec gods are not consistent. They evolve, contradict, battle one another across time and myth. You sit on a mat made of woven reeds, watching a priest pour pulque into a small bowl before placing it at the statue's feet. The drink is for the god, but it's also for the ritual of binding of worlds. The priest chants quietly in Nahuatl voice, rising and falling like water over stone. You close your eyes, In the flicker of torchlight, you imagine the first time this place was consecrated. Perhaps Moctezuma stood here younger, uncertain. Perhaps he came to understand something the others hadn't, that not all gods crave blood, and that some require quieter offerings. But then again, Quetzalcoatl was also said to have left this world on a raft of snakes, vowing to return from the east. Some say Moctezuma believed Hernan Cortés was that return. Others say it was an excuse for hesitation, a political miscalculation hidden behind divine paranoia. Historians still argue whether Moctezuma truly believed Cortés was a god, or whether it was convenient to pretend. You open your eyes and see the priest has stopped chanting. He watches you now. Not with suspicion, but with gentle amusement, as if he knows your presence is temporary. You're not a part of this timeline, just a visitor, a shadow. You rise and leave the chamber. Outside sunlight cuts through the mist like a blade, turning everything to gold. And across the plaza, the Tzompantli gleams. You head toward it, guided by the sound of flutes. Children are dancing in the plaza now, their small feet moving in rhythm eyes, trained on an instructor in blue feathers. You recognize some of them young acolytes, future priests, maybe even future offerings. But they laugh as they dance oblivious to the tower of skulls nearby. The Aztecs weren't morbid, not in the way modern minds imagine. Death wasn't final, it was transit. A road, not a wall. To die in battle or sacrifice was to become divine wind, to join the sun in its eternal struggle. You weren't mourned, you were celebrated. Still, the skulls don't smile. You reach the base of the rack and notice something new. Small bundles of flowers tied to the lower beams. Marigolds, the flower of the dead. Someone has made this tower into an altar. You look closer. One skull has been painted with a red spiral on the forehead, symbol of returning breath. Another has feathers tucked into its jaw like a mocking smile. There is meaning here, but also mischief. Maybe a priest's joke. Maybe an artist's quiet rebellion. Behind you, a woman says softly, "That one was my brother." You turn. She's young, maybe 20, with eyes like smoky quartz and a stone pendant at her throat. She doesn't cry, just nods at the skull. He died in war. They gave him to Huitzilopochtli. He would have liked that. You want to say something, but you're not sure if you're allowed. She smiles. It's better than nothing. And then she walks away. You stand there, suddenly aware of how thin the line is between terror and tribute. This isn't just architecture. It's a ledger. A memory palace made from bone. Moctezuma walks past you, nodding to the priests as they inspect the structure. He runs a hand along the lowest beam, as if checking for rot. His face is blank, but not indifferent. Focused. The skulls, he once said, must be honored with symmetry. You remember now, years ago during a festival, he asked the priests to rearrange a section of the rack because one skull faced slightly left while its neighbors faced right. They did it, of course, because that's what power looks like when even the dead obey geometry. That night back at the palace, you find yourself pacing the courtyard. The stars are sharp overhead, piercing the velvet sky. You hear frogs again. The rustle of bat wings. Somewhere someone is singing to the moon in a falsetto so pure it gives you chills. And then you see it, a new section of the skull rack going up. Not at the temple, not in the plaza, but behind the palace. Hidden, smaller, more personal. You realize this isn't about religion anymore. Moctezuma is building one for himself. The next day begins strangely quiet. The usual hum of the city, the vendors calling children, laughing priests, chanting feels dulled like sound underwater. You stand at the edge of the market square, watching steam curl from clay pots, smelling roasted maize peppers and grilled fish. But even here, in the daily bustle of Tenochtitlan, your eyes are drawn once more to the shadows behind the temples. Because you now know what lies there. Or rather, what's growing there. The new skull rack Moctezuma's private one isn't public yet. It's tucked within a walled garden beside the palace, behind hedges, trimmed in precise squares. Most people don't know it exists, but you do. And so do a select few priests, and perhaps more tellingly, the emperor's personal architect. Yes, there's an architect. His name is lost to history, no glyph remains, no codex doodle. But you see him here now, thin-balled, with 2 missing fingers and a sharp jaw. He sketches with charcoal on deer hide, calculating the angles of skull placement with the same rigor he'd apply to a pyramid. You watch as he measures the alignment between jawbone and zygomatic arch, muttering to himself, balance is everything, even in death. Moctezuma watches from a shaded bench, a woven cloak around his shoulders. His leg is stretched straight on a stone stool, but his eyes are intense, focused. He nods approvingly as the architect finishes a diagram, showing skulls forming a spiral, a helix of human faces. It's breathtaking and completely deranged, but also beautiful. You feel disturbed by the realization. The rack in its mathematical clarity is almost calming, like a cathedral made of bone, like someone took grief and sorted it into neat little rows. Historians still argue whether Moctezuma believed the skulls held spiritual energy or whether they were political symbols, warnings encoded in biology. Either way, he made them permanent. He preserved terror like a taxidermist. The emperor turns to a priest and murmurs something you barely catch. Make sure the rain skulls are lower than the fire skulls. You blink. Is he categorizing them by the gods they were sacrificed to? Apparently, yes. You learn that each victim was chosen for a reason. Some were gifts to Tlaloc, the rain god, others to Xiuhticoutli, lord of fire. A skull placed at the wrong height would be an offense, not just to aesthetics, but to divinity. You wander away unnerved and walk into the House of Eagles, where the elite warriors train. Feathers scatter in the air, and the slap of obsidian-edged swords against wooden dummies echoes like thunder. These men fight not to kill, but to capture. That's the goal, to bring back bodies for the altars. You meet a young warrior named Akamapishtali, broad-shouldered, barely out of boyhood eyes, bright with purpose. He grins as he spars, teeth flashing in the sun. The emperor promised a feast if I bring back a noble, he says between swings. A feast, he nods. Feast for us. Feast for the gods. Everyone wins. You don't correct him. That night, the feast occurs. Moctezuma presides in silence as platters are passed turkey maize cakes, squash blossom tamales. The nobles chatter. Priests drink pulque. The mood is strangely light, even festive. But at the center of the table is a new skull. Polished, cradled in a gold frame. A centerpiece. No one mentions it, but everyone glances at it. You stare, waiting for someone to explain. No one does. Later, you drift through the palace halls. The obsidian mirrors remain warped, but something has changed. One reflects you perfectly now. You lean in. Behind your image, the skull rack appears. You spin around. Nothing. You step outside into the courtyard. There, by torchlight, Moctezuma is walking with 2 attendants. His limp is pronounced tonight. Maybe the weather, maybe the weight of what he's building. He pauses near the new rack and looks up at the skulls. Then he says, "We are what we arrange." The attendants nod. One asks, how many more Lord Moctezuma doesn't answer. just whispers enough for the gods to notice, and walks away. You sit by the fountain dizzy from the heat and the pulse of the city. You try to remember your world, your century, your bed. But the lines blur. Because here skulls are architecture, here memory is made of calcium, and the man building it all walks with a limp and a blueprint for fear. You wake before sunrise, if sleep can even be found, in a city where nightmares are woven into the infrastructure, and follow the low sound of conch shells being blown in the distance. A priest's call, a summoning. You walk almost hypnotically toward the great temple again, your sandals whispering against the flagstones. It's quiet eerily so. Even the insects seem to hush themselves as the horizon blushes with the first orange glow of morning. Then you see him. Moctezuma is already there, seated on a stone bench beside the Tzompantli. He's not wearing his usual gold or feathers. Just a plain cotton cloak, his foot propped up on a carved jaguar stool. His hands rest on his knees. His eyes are wide open, unblinking as if he hasn't slept. You almost expect him to say something, but he doesn't. Instead, a worker approaches another skull in hand. This one is different. The eye sockets are fractured inward, the jaw cleanly snapped. Still, it is lovingly placed into the rack. The priest beside the worker whispers a short prayer to Tonatiuh, the sun god, and then marks the skull with a stripe of red dye. Moctezuma finally speaks, but not to you. He died bravely, he says. I watched it myself. A long pause. Then the gods are watching. We must give them shape to stare at. You realize, standing there with the emperor, that the Tzompantli isn't just a monument. It's a theater, a divine scoreboard. The more skulls it holds, the more favor the empire believes it earns. It's theology by quantity. You step away to the edge of the platform, looking down at the plaza, now slowly coming alive. Merchants roll out reed mats. Children skip over puddles. A woman balances a basket of flowers on her head, her path swinging past the temple without a glance. The skulls are everywhere, but also invisible. That's the genius. And the horror. You find your way back to the smaller private skull rack in the palace gardens later that day. It has grown. There are now names engraved beneath some skulls. Glyphs carved into small obsidian plaques, a hummingbird for one, a jaguar for another, a curled serpent for the third. These were not random sacrifices. These were people Moctezuma knew. One plaque reads, Tekehua, a class of noble warriors. Another bears the glyph for a singer followed by a flute. You feel a chill he's organizing memory, curating his own haunted museum. Historians still argue whether these personalized skulls were acts of mourning or of control. Did Moctezuma grieve them or claim them? As you sit beneath a flowering tree, the scent of crushed marigold drifting on the breeze, a scribe approaches. Young, thin, his face smeared with charcoal. He's copying the placement of each skull onto a deerskin scroll, labeling them with quiet precision. You ask what he's doing. He doesn't look up. The emperor says nothing exists unless it is recorded. Another long moment, and nothing is remembered unless it is arranged. You walk the rows again. Each skull different, each expression, some frozen in agony, others strangely serene. And in the middle of the rack, one has a gold tooth. You lean in. It's been polished, not for vanity, for emphasis. You wonder who that man was. Nearby, a noblewoman gossips with a priest. You catch a snippet. He was a diplomat. Gave his heart for the peace treaty. Or refused it, the priest mutters. She shrugs. Either way, he shines. You retreat toward the palace edge unnerved, and find yourself facing a wall covered in frescoes. Not skulls this time, but stars swirling in intricate patterns. Moctezuma had these painted recently, you're told. They mirror the constellations seen during eclipses. Because the Emperor has a new obsession now, signs in the sky. He believes the heavens are speaking. He's not wrong. Just last week, a comet streaked above the city. The priests howled. One slashed his own thigh. The market shut down for 2 days. Even the children knew something was wrong. And Moctezuma. He stood on the temple stairs staring upward, mumbling to the stars like they owed him something. That night, he sacrificed 30 captives without ceremony. No music, no dance. Just blood efficiently spilled. The skulls are already drying near the racks. You sit with that thought for a long while. Maybe the Emperor isn't building a tower. Maybe he's building a message. One that stretches from earth to sky, made of fear symmetry, and faces that never look away. And you, dreamer, are beginning to understand why. You've started walking more cautiously now, as if each footstep in Tenochtitlan echoes through time, or worse, through someone's memory. The streets aren't just streets anymore. They're arteries. Every stone feels like it remembers something. It's midday, and the heat clings like guilt. You find yourself standing once again before the Tzompantli, the Great One this time, the public structure that's now grown to nearly double its original width. The priests have added horizontal arms to the outermost poles, allowing for more skulls per row. It's starting to curve subtly like a smile or a snarl. Workers scrape bone with obsidian blades, careful not to damage the structure. The skulls are cleaned, painted, classified. There are even rumors that some are sorted by social class nobles on the higher rows, commoners below, criminals to the far left. You don't want to believe it. But then you see a priest nodding approvingly at a particularly symmetrical skull with filed teeth, a nobleman. That one, he says, was a poet. Another replies, then he deserves a view. You walk on. Today you're heading to the astrologer's quarter, an area just east of the Templo Mayor, where priests track celestial signs on codices and bark charts drawn on deerskin. Moctezuma visits here often now. You find him already there, surrounded by stars, but not the real kind. He stands in front of a circular mural depicting Tonalpohualli, the sacred calendar. Its glyphs twist like snake's movement, maze, wind, flint, death. His finger traces the outer rings, stopping at the day marked Allen movement, associated with earthquakes, change, collapse. Do you see it? He murmurs, not looking at you. You don't answer. Not because you're afraid, but because it's not really a question. He continues, the gods grow restless. The sky repeats itself. And the bones. He turns now finally. The bones keep us steady. You nod slowly. Later, in a quieter garden behind the astrologer's compound, a young priest named Izel shows you their latest codex. It's barely dry. Painted in rich colors, it tells the story of the fifth sun, the current age, the one the Aztecs believe they live in. It began with sacrifice, and it will end in fire and earthquakes. You know, Izel says quietly, some of us think it's already ending. You ask why. He gestures vaguely toward the temple. Too much blood. Too much fear. When we feed the gods too well, they start to notice. And they grow. Impatient. You leave the codex and step back out into the sun. Back in the plaza, something new has appeared. A small stage, low circular with painted steps and flower garlands. A mock ceremony is being prepared, actors dressed as gods, dancers in stylized death masks. It's part of the Tlaquexipehualistli festival, the flaying of men in honor of Zipe Totec, the god of renewal. You remember what you've heard about this ritual. Captives are tied to posts and made to fight armed warriors. If they survive long enough, they're flayed, skinned alive. Their skin is then worn by priests who dance through the streets representing rebirth. Yes, rebirth through suffering. You sit near the back, hidden in the shadows, as the crowd gathers. A captive is brought out, young, trembling, but proud. He chants a prayer to Huitzilopochtli, raises his arms, and smiles. Then the dance begins. It's horrifying, slow, ceremonial. A blur of feathers, blades, painted faces. The skinning happens behind a curtain, but you hear it. And when the priest emerges, wearing the skin like a cloak, the crowd erupts in reverent silence. They don't cheer. They don't flinch. They believe. Historians still argue whether these rituals were understood metaphorically or viscerally, whether the priests believed in literal godhood or simply used it as power theater. Perhaps it doesn't matter, because here theater is power. Later that night, Moctezuma dines with his priests beneath a canopy of reed and silk. The topic of conversation, how to protect the city from omens. There must be a new monument, one says, one the gods can see from the sky. Moctezuma doesn't answer right away. He dips a tortilla into chili sauce. Then he sets it down. What if we make the rack circular, he says. The priests glance at each other. Like the sun, he adds. So it spins. The silence that follows is reverent and terrifying. You understand then? He's not just building towers. He's building a clock, a skull clock for the gods. You walk away light-headed, heart-pounding. Behind you, the workers are already sketching the circle's foundation in the dirt. By now, the city no longer feels like something you're visiting. It feels like something you're inside of, inside like a mouth, like a temple, like a skull. The rhythm of Tenochtitlan has folded around you. You know when the bells ring, which alleys flood first after rain, and where to stand to avoid the worst of the incense smoke. And still, even in familiarity, dread clings like the sticky heat of the noon sun. You sit on a temple step beside a vendor selling cocoa beans and carved whistles. Behind her, a wall of painted glyphs tells the story of the founding of the city of the prophecy, the wandering, the eagle. The image is familiar now, the eagle perched on a cactus devouring a serpent. The sign that led the Mexica to settle here on the lake's center. Moctezuma appears in the mural too later, of course, standing beside the gods dressed in shimmering green, his face a calm mask. You trace the outline of the serpent and feel the weight of history. But what draws your eye isn't the snake, it's the eyes of the eagle. They are always watching. Today you follow a priest named Teohuatzin up the Templo Mayer's eastern staircase, your breath shallow in the rising heat. He talks as he climbs, half to himself, half to you. Everything sacred begins with a sign, he says. An omen, a vision, a whisper. The city was born from a bird. The skulls remind the gods we still listen. You reach the top where the altar to Huitzilopochtli faces east toward the rising sun. Here blood has soaked the stone for over a century. Even now it glistens faintly polished, not by rain, but by memory. A conch shell sounds below. Another sacrifice is ready. You turn to see them bringing up a prisoner, eyes defiant, body scarred. A warrior. He doesn't beg. He doesn't speak. He just climbs. They lay him across the slab. The priest raises the obsidian blade, and Moctezuma appears silent, standing at the altar's far side. No crown today, just a thin gold chain. His cloak is embroidered with suns. He nods once. The blade flashes, and the sun rises. You watch the blood spill in perfect synchrony with the first rays of light, a beat too poetic to be planned, and yet. This city runs on ritual timing. Every act is aligned with celestial precision. You understand now why the skulls are arranged with such obsession. They aren't random. their calendars, their sermons, their diagrams drawn in bone. Moctezuma once said, "If the gods see no symmetry, they may think we've forgotten them." Later that day, you visit the diviners near the House of Darkness, a quiet stone building wrapped in mist and superstition. They specialize in Tonalpa Huwali readings, interpreting personal destinies based on one's day of birth. An old woman reads yours. Her hands are cool, her fingers ink-stained. "You were born under Oxalotl," she says. The jaguar. Night battle, hidden hunger. You try to laugh it off. She doesn't smile. "You will see the end of things," she adds, almost kindly. Then she hands you a stone bead. "For remembering," she says. You leave quickly. Outside in the open light, something pulls your gaze upward. They're a formation of birds, vultures circling. Their cries pierce the sky like broken flutes. You follow them across the city past the great causeway, where villagers gather to stare at the lake. Something has appeared on the far side. Small boats foreign, strange, sails like wings, metal that gleams too white in the sun. The people murmur. One man whispers, "They've returned." Another spits and says, "No, they've arrived." Historians still argue whether omens truly preceded the Spanish arrival, or whether the stories were written later, woven into a narrative of inevitability. Moctezuma, however, seems convinced. You hear it that night, his voice carried over the garden walls. He's pacing again, muttering about stars, serpents, circles, and fire. He orders more skulls added to the circular rack. The outer ring must be completed by the next moon. They must see it, he says, even from the water. You look up, and the sky feels heavy, like something watching back. You think of the eagle, the cactus, the serpent. But what if the prophecy wasn't about arrival? What if it was about return? And what if Moctezuma isn't just afraid of losing his empire, but afraid that the gods are coming back to collect? You walk through the palace just before dawn, and everything is wrong. The air feels thicker. The servants move quieter. The birds have stopped singing. Somewhere deep beneath the stone floor, a drum beats not rhythmically, not musically, but like a heart under strain. You follow the sound until you reach a narrow corridor lit by only a few faint torches, their smoke curling upward in frustration. And there just ahead stands a statue. It's not one you've seen before. Tall, angular, carved from obsidian darker than shadow. A jagged smile stretches across a face that seems to shimmer in and out of visibility. It stands with one foot missing, broken, or unfinished. The remaining leg is muscled and poised as if stepping forward. You feel it before you hear it. Tezcatlipoca whispers a priest behind you reverently. You shiver. The smoking mirror. The god of chaos, illusion, and destiny. And like Moctezuma, he walks with one leg. The other was lost in creation or in punishment, depending on which version you accept. And here in this dark hallway, where no sunlight enters his image, is revered like a secret. Tezcatlipoca is not a god you pray to for blessings. You don't ask him for rain or corn or love. You pray that he doesn't notice you. Moctezuma noticed him instead. You hear the emperor's voice long before you see him echoing from the end of the corridor. He's speaking to the statue, or maybe to himself. "I saw you in the mirror again." Pause. "You were wearing my face." The priest beside you bows. He comes here now each morning. Says the god is whispering maps into his dreams. You want to ask maps to where, but you already know. You step into the chamber. Moctezuma is alone. He doesn't turn when you enter. He's barefoot, a thin cotton robe falling from his shoulders. His left foot is bandaged, swollen again. He leans slightly compensating. They say I limp because of a childhood fever, he says softly. But I think the gods mark the ones they want to follow them. You watch as he traces a symbol in chalk at the statue's base, 4 interlocking eyes arranged like a compass. It sees everything, he whispers. Forward, backward, sideways. And it saw them before I did. He finally turns to face you. His eyes are rimmed red, but not with tears, just sleeplessness. I dreamed of towers made of mirrors, he says. But they cracked, and behind them were only teeth. He moves toward the door, limping, wincing. They come with thunder, and gods on leashes, he mutters. They come speaking in steel. You follow him back out into the sunlight, back into the waking world. But even here things feel thinner, as if the veil between real and dream has worn down. He stops in the garden where the circular skull rack has grown again. It now spirals inward like a snake devouring itself. They said it was madness to arrange them like this, he says. But Tezcatlipoca wants them to spin. You glance at the nearest skull. Its jaw is painted with stripes now, teeth outlined in gold leaf. Below it, a small mirror fragment catches the sun and blinds you for a moment. You blink, you see stars, or maybe signs. That evening, during a storm, Moctezuma calls a private ceremony. Only his inner priests attend. You, silent and unnoticed, remain at the edge. Rain lashes the city. Thunder claws at the sky. A new figure is brought forth, a foreigner, pale skin, red beard. He was captured scouting along the causeway. The priests lay him across the altar. Moctezuma lifts his hand. The dagger hovers, but nothing happens. Instead, he leans close to the captive's face and asks softly, "What do you see in me?" The man doesn't answer. He's shaking too hard. Moctezuma turns to his priests. "Not for the gods," he says. "This one is for the mirror." And with one clean motion, he draws the blade not across the chest, but the throat. It's not ritual. It's a message. The blood pools, mixing with the rain. The body is dragged away. The skull, foreign, unfamiliar, will take days to clean. But already the emperor gestures to the rack. "Place it at the center," he says. Historians still argue whether this was a political gesture or a divine one. Was Moctezuma sacrificing foreigners to warn the gods or to warn the Spanish? Either way, the spiral grows. And now it has a foreign tooth. That night, you find yourself standing before the obsidian mirror in the palace hallway. You look in, and it doesn't show you. It shows Moctezuma, smiling. The city doesn't sleep anymore. You feel it in the streets, where once the cool hush of midnight soothed the air. Now there's constant tension, like a held breath that never releases. Even the chinampas seem to ripple more violently in the night breeze. Somewhere, an owl screeches and is answered by silence too still to be natural. You sit beside the canal, watching the moon float above the water, like an unblinking eye. You're not alone. A group of priests are gathered nearby, speaking in hushed tones, recounting the latest dreams of the emperor. He says they come in iron, one whispers, that they ride beasts taller than a man. Another leans in, and that they drink fire. These are not metaphors. They are attempts to explain horses, muskets, cannons. But to these men wise, learned in the movements of stars and blood, it is sorcery. It is proof of apocalypse. You try to remind yourself that these are people of deep thought, not panic. But fear, when shared, becomes contagious. You drift away and find yourself back near the palace, where construction on the circular skull rack continues even through the night. Torches flicker in the humid dark. The workers move quietly, reverently, lifting each skull like a prayer. Moctezuma is there. Still, always. He no longer returns to his chamber unless carried. His leg has worsened, perhaps infection, perhaps symbolism. He says little now, choosing instead to watch the spiral grow. He communicates mostly in gestures. Tonight he gestures toward the center. A single empty beam. No more room, the architect murmurs. Then we expand outward, Moctezuma replies. His voice is raspy but firm. The spiral must continue, even if it reaches the lake. You remember a story told by a young priest a few nights ago of a god whose path through the sky curved into itself, endlessly circling until it collapsed under its own perfection. The skulls are circling now, not just in structure, but in ritual. This evening's offering is different. A woman, an oracle from the far coast. Her eyes are bright with visions, even as she walks to the platform without resistance. Moctezuma himself limps forward. He doesn't carry a blade this time. Instead, he offers her a mirror, small, round obsidian. She accepts it, holds it to her own face, then kisses it. Without a word, she kneels. Two priests perform the act swiftly. The blood falls. The mirror remains. Later, it is embedded in the spiral, a single dark eye at the center of the circle. You wake in your chamber to find a scroll tucked beneath your mat. It's not signed, but the handwriting is familiar, careful, angular, imperial. It reads, "They came from the east, not as gods, but as reflections. We looked too long and the mirror broke. I gave them blood so they would see only themselves." The ink is still wet. You try to return the scroll to the archives, but no one there has seen it before. The head priest shrugs. Perhaps you dreamed it. Maybe you did. But that night the moon returns full and blood red. Children are kept indoors. Priests howl on rooftops. Women tie knots into cords and bury them in the earth, praying the gods will ignore their houses. Moctezuma does not appear. He is said to be fasting, meditating, speaking with the gods. You walk alone through the city. The skull rack by now is enormous. The spiral has a second loop. It resembles a snail, or a galaxy, or a clock with too many hours. Each skull reflects moonlight like porcelain. You lean against a nearby column, exhausted. That's when you see it. A single skull, unpainted, unadorned, unfamiliar, marked only by a small glyph carved into the forehead. Not a god symbol, not a warrior class. Just one word, Tlajpiaj, the one who watches. And the skull looks like you. No, it's not possible. You step closer. It doesn't blink, of course, but it feels like it might. You try to remember how long you've been here. Not in Tenochtitlan, but in the dream. Days, weeks, has Moctezuma always been building this rack? Or have you historians still argue whether the spiral ever truly existed? Whether it was a metaphor, an allegory told by frightened priests after the conquest? No bones remain, no stone carvings, no mirrors survived intact. But maybe they didn't have to. Maybe it was never for them. Maybe it was built so someone like you would remember it. So you'd walk through it skull by skull, turning inward until you saw your own face and realized the spiral never ended because it was already inside you. It's market day again, but nothing feels normal. The vendors still chant about chili paste and obsidian knives. The flowers are still stacked in golden orange mounds. The music still twangs from turtle shell drums and reed flutes. But underneath it all is a sense of rehearsal, like everyone is acting out the idea of normal rather than living it. You stand in the heart of the great Tianquistli market, watching as a child barters 2 cacao beans for a string of tiny red feathers. Life continues. It must. But even here, far from the temple's whispers follow you like shadows. They say the skull rack moves now. No, it's not moving. It's growing. I heard the Emperor dreams in bones. You don't speak, you just walk. Toward the temple, toward the spiral. By now the rack is not just wide, it's tall. Layers of bone stacked like a staircase for the gods. The center glimmers with polished obsidian mirrors, catching the light and fracturing it into strange angles. Sunlight hits it differently each hour, so that no two shadows fall the same way twice. Moctezuma sits beneath it, shaded by a painted parasol. He looks thinner, older, not just sick fading. Beside him, a young woman reads from a codex. Her voice is soft, rhythmic, steady. He asks her to read him stories of beginnings, a priest explains. He's looking for the moment we broke the world. You edge closer. The codex she reads from is not Aztec. It's Spanish. You don't recognize the script, but Moctezuma does. He stares at the page as if it burns. Historians still argue whether the emperor had access to European texts, the priest adds. But we know this. He tried to understand them, not fight them, not yet. Later, in the cool hush of the palace library, you find fragments of these books, Latin phonetic Nahuatl broken glyphs. You run your fingers across a page that references metal men who ride beasts and a sea that opens like a mouth. You're not sure if it's prophecy or translation error. Maybe it's both. You spend the afternoon with a sculptor named Zolo, who's been assigned a disturbing task to create a bust of Moctezuma from a single fused block of skulls. You ask if that's possible. It is now, he shrugs. The bones are dry enough. The gods don't mind. He works with obsidian tools, carving the ridges of the emperor's face from calcified memory. Jawline from a warrior. Brow from a priest. Nose from a merchant. A face of many. Zolo pauses mid-chisel to light incense, pressing his forehead to the sculpture. Not a tribute, he whispers. A warning. You leave before he finishes. At sunset, the emperor rises painfully and asks to be taken to the edge of the lake. You walk with him. No one speaks. Even the frogs are silent. The causeway stretches into twilight like a ribbon. There on the horizon, sails glimmer again. Closer this time. Larger. They're just men, Moctezuma says softly. But they carry the bones of gods in their hands. You don't understand. Then he explains, they bring fire that speaks. Fire that spits teeth. Fire that remembers nothing. You realize he's describing muskets. And for the first time, you hear something in his voice that's been missing all along. Terror. He asks to return to the temple. Back at the spiral, he orders something new, a skull removed. Not replaced. Removed. The priests resist. But the pattern, he raises a hand. Let them notice the absence. Let them feel it. A single skull, one near the center, is carefully unhooked. Where it once sat is now a hole. A silence in the symmetry. You look through it, and for just a second you swear the entire spiral seems to turn. As if it were never still. As if it always moved, but only in the corner of your eye. That night dreams come in fragments. Skulls speaking in riddles. Mirrors that bleed. The sound of teeth grinding, not from a mouth, but from walls. You wake in a cold sweat, lying on a stone floor beneath the palace arcade. Zuma passes you without comment. His foot drags. The spiral waits. Today begins not with drums, but with silence. And that's far worse. The city is suspended in a stillness that seems to radiate from the stone itself. No trader's call from the marketplace. No children splash in the canals. Even the birds stay hidden, as though nature itself knows something is coming. You step onto the plaza and immediately feel the difference. The air is charged like lightning has passed through and forgotten to strike. People walk slower. Eyes dart upward more often. Every shadow is measured twice. And then you see why. Above you, the sun dims. It isn't a cloud. It isn't smoke. It's an eclipse. The priests are already at the Templo Mare, keening in tones that make your bones vibrate. Their hands are raised to the sky. You push forward with the gathering crowd, hearts thudding not with awe, but with the deep ancestral dread that all humans share when day turns to night. The eclipse is partial, but no one breathes until it's over. And even then, no one speaks. You wander the city afterward, noting the changes. A woman dumps all her obsidian mirrors into the canal. A merchant refuses to touch his wares, claiming they are now cursed. A young man scrapes paint from the temple wall, sobbing. Moctezuma remains inside. The spiral, however, does not. That evening, in response to the eclipse, the Emperor orders new modifications, a ring of obsidian mirrors embedded into the outermost row of the spiral. Not for reflection, but for deflection. If the gods are looking in, he wants them to see themselves. Historians still argue whether these mirrors were meant to confuse celestial forces or simply blind enemy eyes. The priests comply, chiseling sockets into the frame and sliding the dark mirrors into place. You help briefly. You don't know why, but your fingers move without thought. A mirror slips in, and just for a second, it shows a sky made of skulls. The spiral glimmers with black glass, each shard angled precisely to catch the morning sun or the gaze of something older. That night, a strange wind blows through the city, curling around temples, whispering along alleys. People wake from dreams they don't remember, but cannot forget. You lie beneath a painted frieze showing the gods creating humans from cornmeal and blood. It's the blood that holds your attention. You dream of corn that bleeds when bitten. The next morning, Moctezuma appears before the council. He is barefoot, unarmed, alone. He walks to the base of the Tzompantli spiral and places a single item on the lowest rung his crown. Gasps ripple through the priests. One of them falls to his knees. The Emperor raises his hand. This belongs to the gods now, he says. Let them wear it, if they dare. You walk beside him afterward. He is lighter, somehow freed of something. They won't understand it, he says. You ask who? He shrugs. Anyone. You return to the spiral again. It has become less like a structure and more like a presence, an entity that pulses at the edge of perception. Its rows twist and loop impossibly intricate. You can't tell where it ends. You're not sure it does. A new skull is added. Not a warrior, not a criminal. A priest. Volunteered, you're told. His skull is placed dead center in the mirrored ring. You look into the nearest shard and see not your reflection, but his. The spiral is watching you, or remembering you, or waiting for you. Later, you overhear Moctezuma speaking to a group of children in the palace courtyard. He tells them a story. Once a man built a tower so high, the gods knocked it down. But instead of destroying it, they scattered it, so that every tower after would be a shadow of the first. One child asks, "Did the man die?" Moctezuma smiles. No. He became the wind. That night, as you drift through the city, the eclipse still stains your memory. You close your eyes and hear the spiral. It doesn't make sound. Not exactly. But it feels like something humming behind the sky. You turn in your sleep and dream you're climbing it. Skull by skull. Each one whispering a different word. Your own voice joins theirs. And you don't wake up screaming. You wake up chanting. The next day begins with color, violent, blinding, and unnatural. You step outside into a world painted crimson. The sunrise isn't red, it's bleeding. The lake reflects it like a wound. A mist hovers low over the canals, and the walls of the temple seem to pulse in it, soaked in some internal memory of flame. The spiral rack gleams, A new layer has been added, not of skulls, but of red pigment. Every bone now bears a stripe, a line, or a smear. Looks ritualistic, but you soon realize it's logistical. A new classification system. They've begun marking them by dream, a scribe tells you. He's perched on a low stool, cataloging the skulls with a reed brush and a gourd of ink. You raise an eyebrow. Yes, he confirms. Each one was asked before the blade fell. What did they see in their final night? Some dreamed of fire, others of birds, a few of mirrors cracking. And now those dreams are symbols burned into bone. You ask if that's allowed. The scribe shrugs. The emperor said, "The gods like stories. Let them read ours in faces." You walk the spiral again, and now it truly feels like a book. A screaming book. Each turn reveals a new chapter's skulls with golden teeth, skulls with spiral carvings, skulls with holes that don't match the standard piercing. One has your name scratched beneath it. But you've never been here, have you? You step back shaken and find yourself on the temple's highest step. From here you see the city stretching out like a quilt, each canal and garden a thread. But you also see something else. The horizon is no longer empty. The sails are here. Spanish ships anchored just far enough to taunt, but close enough to make everyone nervous. Moctezuma doesn't speak of them anymore. He doesn't need to. The spiral speaks for him now. In response, he orders the construction of a smaller spiral inside the palace beneath his chambers. Not for public view, not for the gods. For him, this one will hold his own skull. You watch the workers prepare the central space, a shallow pit surrounded by carved symbols of smoke blood and twisted roots. It looks like a spiral in dirt waiting to be filled. A priest walks by with a basket. Inside it is a skull. Not just any skull, his father's. You recognize it from an earlier section of the rack. It's been removed, upgraded. Legacy, the priest says. The spiral must begin with kin. Later you sit with Moctezuma in his private garden. He no longer wears sandals. His feet are wrapped in cotton and herbs. His limp is worse. He uses a staff carved with a glyph for fire. Why skulls, you ask? He closes his eyes. Because gods have no memory, only appetite. Then he opens them and smiles, not cruelly, not madly. Just gently. And bones are reminders. Even the gods need to be reminded. That night he visits the obsidian mirror again. You follow. You watch from behind the door as he places both hands on the surface and whispers. They are already inside the city. You think he means the Spaniards. But he turns and says, "We let them in when we built the spiral. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you climb the temple again barefoot. You touch one skull, smooth warm from the day's heat. It breathes. You pull away. Laugh. It must be your imagination. But the next skull sighs, and the next one whispers. You press your ear to it. You hear your own voice, saying something you haven't said yet. They are already inside the city. You run down the steps, sandals slapping the stone. You reach the lake's edge. A small canoe drifts by. Inside, a boy paddles oblivious. You ask him the date. He gives you one that doesn't exist. You sit down, heart-pounding hands, cold. The spiral isn't a monument. It's a loop of memory, of thought, of fear. And you're inside it now. Like Moctezuma, like the gods. Like everyone who's ever looked too long at a skull and thought, what if it's still thinking? The next morning, the city awakens like a bruise. The light doesn't pour, it limps. Tenochtitlan, which once shimmered proudly across the lake, now seems to sag under the weight of something unspeakable. You notice it in the way priests clutch their capes a little tighter and in the way the vendors offer their goods without meeting anyone's eyes. The city is still moving, but only because it hasn't remembered how to stop. You find yourself drawn once again to the far edge of the ceremonial complex. Not the towering temple, not the spiral of skulls, but a smaller, almost forgotten shrine tucked behind the aviary. You've never noticed it before. That's strange. The entrance is shaped like a gaping mouth. You walk inside. It is completely dark. Then a torch flares, and you see it a wall of flayed human skins stretched taut like parchment, their outlines faintly inked with prayers. You don't scream, because you've been in this world too long for that. Instead, you step forward, breath shallow. This is the domain of Zyp-Totec, the flayed lord, god of fertility, of agriculture, of renewal. His priests wear the skin of sacrificed victims for 20 days during his festival, dancing through the streets like ghosts of meat. You're standing in the heart of it now. A priest approaches barefoot, robed in a freshly worn skin. It hangs loosely from his framed lips, slack where a mouth once was. You feel your stomach turn, but you don't look away. Do you know why we do this? He asks quietly. You shake your head. He raises one arm. The skin swings with a motion grotesque, yet strangely graceful. It is to remember that all things must be shed to grow. The seed must die to give maize. The man must die to feed the stars. You swallow hard. And the emperor? He smiles sadly. He wears no skin now. Only time. You leave the shrine feeling as though something has been peeled from you. Outside, the city has grown even quieter. The spiral has changed again. You didn't notice when. You never do. Now hanging from its outer ring are not skulls, but skins. Each one painted with glyphs stretched between bone like banners. The spiral is no longer a structure. It's a tapestry, a message, a threat, a hymn. Moctezuma walks its perimeter slowly, his staff tapping the stone. You watch from a shaded corner. His face is gaunt. His eyes shimmer with a light that might be fever or revelation. He stops at a new addition, a skin stretched beside a cracked skull. He stares at it for a long time. Then he kneels. Not in pain, in prayer. He whispers something. You move closer. You catch fragments. They come from a world with no spiral. They erase to build. They do not remember their dead, so they do not fear them. You step back. You understand. The spiral is Moctezuma's last defense. Not against blades or fire, but against forgetting. He is building a memory so visceral, so grotesquely visible, that even gods will pause. That night, a new comet appears. It streaks across the sky like a divine wound, leaving a long red tail. People scream, dogs howl. A priest throws himself into the lake. Moctezuma climbs to the temple's summit alone and screams back. We remember his voice cracks against the stone. Then he falls silent. He doesn't come down. The spiral glows with moonlight. You walk its outer curve again. A skull at your feet bears a message carved into its cranium. We flayed ourselves so they wouldn't have to. You feel dizzy. You reach out to steady yourself. Your hand touches something warm. You look down. It's your own skin. Painted, stretched, tagged with a glyph. You don't know how, or when, or why. But you are part of the spiral now. The next time you open your eyes, it takes a while to realize you are not asleep. The light is too clean, too sterile. The city is strangely empty. You stand in the plaza and there is no sound, not a whisper of wind, not the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, not even the mournful murmur of temple flutes. Tenochtitlan has gone quiet. The kind of quiet that comes just before something breaks. You look around. No crowds, no markets, no vendors slapping tortillas into the air. The temples loom as ever, still heavy with memory. But it's as if the city itself has stepped out of its own skin. The spiral, though. The spiral remains. You approach slowly, not quite trusting the silence. You expect the usual crowd's priests, adjusting bone placement workers, dusting blood away with feathers, children playing too close to history. But today, it's just you. And the Emperor. Moctezuma stands at the center alone, looking up at the structure as if he no longer recognizes it. He doesn't see you. Or maybe he does, and chooses not to speak. His robes are simple. White cotton, no jewelry, no gold, no staff. He is barefoot. He walks the spiral counterclockwise, one foot in front of the other. You follow. Each row seems taller than before. The outer edge of the spiral is now taller than a man, and the path through it has narrowed like a labyrinth, growing tighter as it feeds on itself. You pass skulls that are cracked and burned. Some have glyphs that no longer translate. Some have mirrors still intact to your face, reflected over and over, warped by time and war and prophecy. One skull whispers, "Leave before the gods forget how to dream." You don't. Moctezuma stops at a corner where the spiral doubles back. "This was never for them," he says suddenly. You ask who. He looks at you for the first time in what feels like centuries. "The gods," he says. "The Spaniards. The priests." He places a hand on one of the skulls. "This was for me." You feel a pressure behind your eyes. Then the memory comes. Not yours. His. You're walking as a child again, dragging that bad leg, pretending it doesn't hurt. You're staring at a row of skulls on the old rack, counting their teeth like rosary beads. You're dreaming of symmetry, not because it's beautiful, but because it contains the chaos. Back in your own body, your knees buckle. Moctezuma catches you shockingly strong. "We are all spirals," he murmurs. "We all begin in blood. We twist toward silence." He releases you and keeps walking. At the center of the spiral, the newest addition gleams a bronze helmet. Not Aztec, not sacred, Spanish. You step closer and see that it's been melted slightly along one edge. Beneath it, a skull rests. Not cleaned, still bloody. It is the first time the spiral has accepted something incomplete. You look up. The sky darkens again, but not with eclipse nor comet. Smoke. In the distance, pillars of black rise into the air, thick and angry. You smell ash. The fires have begun. The city is burning. But the spiral still grows. New skulls are being brought in, hurriedly, almost frantically. Some are Aztec, others are not. Moctezuma raises his arms and declares, "Let them all belong. Let this spiral remember what we cannot." The priests hesitate, but obey. Even the invaders dead now join the tower. Historians still argue whether this was a final act of defiance or the ultimate surrender. Did Moctezuma seek to elevate his enemies by placing them in the same ritual space? Or did he collapse the distinction, forcing their skulls into the same forgetful spiral? You don't know. But the result is the same. The spiral no longer judges. It includes. That night you walk it alone. The skulls murmur less now, or maybe they're too tired. You reach the center. You find a small obsidian disc. You pick it up. It reflects nothing. You look into the black and see your own skull, not in horror, in relief. You wake, or think you wake, to the sound of voices distant and distorted, like echoes caught in obsidian. The air smells of wet earth, ash, and sweat. You're back at the temple. Or maybe you never left. Smoke hangs low over Tenochtitlan. Not the kind from incense burners, but from buildings, homes, markets, maybe even shrines collapsing under siege. The sky is the color of iron. The lake churns like a wounded animal. The Spanish have arrived, but you don't rush to the city walls. You don't join the warriors. You turn instead toward the spiral. It's grown again. It's unstoppable now. The outermost layer is a web of mirrors, bone, skin, and cloth patches from captives, tokens from priests, feathers, fragments of armor, golden nose rings, broken flutes, broken teeth. It has become organic, a living memory, breathing in ritual, exhaling prophecy, and in the center Moctezuma stands. Or perhaps he doesn't. Perhaps that's just where your eyes go, because he's always there in every version of this city, this spiral, this dream. But now others surround him. Priests, children, merchants, warriors. They're all here, all silent, all watching. And then he moves. He walks to a new platform raised beside the spiral where a bound figure kneels. The prisoner wears steel armor. His beard is short red, his eyes wide. A Spanish soldier. You freeze. This hasn't happened yet. You're watching a moment no one wrote down. The priest raises a dagger, but Moctezuma steps forward. He doesn't hold a weapon. He holds a mirror. Polished, perfect obsidian black. He kneels in front of the soldier, holds the mirror up to the man's face. "Do you see it now?" he asks. The soldier trembles. His lips move. No sound escapes. "Do you see yourself in the spiral then quietly? Or do you only see me?" The soldier stares. The reflection shows both of them blending, warping, twisting in shadow and light. Moctezuma sets the mirror down at the center of the spiral. The soldier's skull is never added. That night, the emperor speaks to his inner circle. You're close enough to hear. He doesn't talk of war, or gods, or dreams. He talks of time. It curves, he says. It returns. It forgets. He places a hand over his heart. This spiral is the only truth I've found. Not in conquest. Not in sacrifice. Not in gold. In shape. You walk with him back to his chambers. The private spiral his has been completed. Only one space remains. You know whose. He doesn't say it. He doesn't need to. As the fires rise around the city, he spends his final days cataloging. Not people, not power. Patterns. He instructs a young scribe to count the dream symbols again. The flame glyph appears most frequently. The mirror glyph second. The maze glyph almost never. Does that mean we're no longer fertile? The scribe asks. Moctezuma shrugs. It means we've stopped planning, only remembering. Later that night, he holds a gathering for his remaining nobles. Not to strategize, but to say goodbye. One by one, they speak memories. Not victories, but mundane things. A rainstorm on the lake, the taste of cactus fruit, the smell of cedar smoke after a feast. Moctezuma smiles at each story. This is what we are, he says. Not skulls, not gods. We are what we remember at the end. When the gathering ends, he returns to the spiral. You follow. He stands in the center one last time. The mirrors reflect a city crumbling. The skulls remain unmoved. He places a small bowl of maize at the base of the spiral, the first maize offering in weeks. Then he looks up, straight at you. He smiles tired, crooked, gentle. You've seen enough, he says. He turns limping and disappears behind the wall of mirrors. You don't follow, because you understand now. The spiral was never for the gods, never for the Spaniards. It was built so that someone, anyone, would find it again. And remember, the city is breaking, not in silence, not in ceremony, but in screaming. You wake to the smell of fire and the sound of metal, not the clang of artisan hammers, but the harsh scrape of swords against stone. You rush to the edge of the palace complex, duck behind a cracked obsidian column, and watch as Spanish soldiers move through the sacred precinct like ants through sugar. Their faces are hard, unreadable beneath plumed helmets. Their armor glints despite the soot in the air. Behind them, Tlaxcalan warriors, once enemies of the Aztecs, now march as allies of Cortes, carrying torches and clubs. You see the first priest fall. He doesn't run. He stands, arms open, whispering something to the sky. The blade comes down anyway. No one hears his prayer. You retreat. Not out of cowardice, but because you must. Because you have to see if it still stands. You run barefoot through alleyways, now littered with fruit bones, shattered plates. You pass a child curled beneath a broken reed mat. You pass a woman covering her ears as the sound of gunfire echoes off the stone. Then you round a corner and see it, a spiral. Still intact, still gleaming, still terrible. Skulls blackened with soot. Mirrors cracked but unfallen. And at its center, Moctezuma, alive, but barely. He stands with his back to you, shoulders slumped. His leg is wrapped in cloth. One hand rests on the bone of a long-dead warrior. The other holds nothing now, not a staff, not a mirror, not a prayer. He turns to you. I tried, he says. You can barely hear him. I gave them blood. I gave them stars. I gave them shape. He gestures to the spiral. They wanted none of it. You step closer. You ask the question you've been dreading. What now? He smiles. I finish the pattern. From behind a nearby curtain of feathers, a young boy emerges. He carries something wrapped in cloth. He unwraps it. A skull. Not Moctezuma's. Not yet. But one carved with a glyph you don't recognize. The Emperor takes it with reverence. He walks to the spiral's final empty rung. Inserts it. The spiral. Hums. Just once. A soft vibration in the soles of your feet. Moctezuma exhales. And then the stones shake. The Spaniards have reached the Templo Mayor. You hear shouting. Gunfire. The wet sound of metal tearing flesh. Moctezuma doesn't flinch. He lifts his arms and speaks not in Nahuatl, not in Spanish, in something older. The wind dies. The fire hesitates. The air thickens. And for one breathless moment, the spiral seems to glow from within. Not light, not fire, something else. Something remembered. The Spaniards burst into the plaza. They stop. They see it. They see him. And they hesitate. Because Moctezuma standing before the spiral of his own design is more terrifying than any god. Then a rock flies. Thrown from the crowd, it strikes him on the temple. He wobbles and falls. They say it was his own people. They say it was an accident. They say it was punishment for inaction. Historians still argue whether Moctezuma was murdered by the Spaniards, killed by his own people, or allowed himself to die. You see none of it. You see him fall and vanish. No body, just cloth. Just smoke. Just silence. The Spaniards move forward, but they don't touch the spiral. They avoid it, as if it sees them, as if it's waiting. You approach the base heart in your throat. A mirror lies there, untouched. You kneel. Look in. You see Moctezuma. You see the spiral. You see yourself older, thinner, limping. You close your eyes. And the spiral is inside you now. The flames finally reach the temple by dawn. You wake to smoke pouring through the stone colonnades, your lungs raw, your eyes watering. You stumble out into the plaza expecting to find only ash, only ruins. But the spiral remains. Somehow, impossibly, the spiral of skulls has not burned. The outer edges are scorched, yes, blackened bone, melted resin, shattered mirrors, but the structure still stands. Its center gleams faintly as though the fire refused to touch it. You approach slowly watching as a few scattered survivors circle it in silence. No one dares speak. The spiral seems to radiate something now, not heat, but pressure. Like the moment before, lightning strikes. The Spanish soldiers have returned. They're standing at the edge of the plaza, confused. You overhear one ask in broken Nahuatl, "What is that?" Another shrugs, crossing himself. "A devil's altar." But none step closer. Even the most zealous conquistadors, men who have torn down gods and melted gold idols into bricks, leave the spiral untouched. One tosses a rock. It hits a skull which tilts, then snaps back upright on its wooden spike. No one tries again. You sit at the base of the spiral for hours, watching, listening, waiting. You begin to see the pattern again, the glyphs, the placement of skulls, the shifts of light. The structure is more than symbolic. It is architectural memory, a city's worth of dreams, deaths, and destinies mapped onto calcium and shadow. That night, you sneak into the archives. What's left of them. You find Moctezuma's personal scrolls, burned along the edges but still legible. In one written in a trembling hand, he writes, "If they take the city, they will still forget." But the spiral remembers. It is not a weapon. It is a whisper. The gods may not return, but neither will they leave. Another scroll contains only drawings, swirling lines, skulls arranged like stars, mirrors placed at angular intervals. You realize he wasn't only building for gods or men. He was building for time. You walk back outside. The city is unrecognizable. Where once stood gardens and shrines, now lies rubble and soot. But the spiral is still there, and someone has added to it. You blink. A new skull. You don't recognize the glyph. It looks recent. Flesh still clings to it. You're not alone. A child sits cross-legged nearby, staring at you. "They're still bringing them," she says. "Who, you ask?" She shrugs. "Everyone." She holds a shard of pottery in one hand. Carved into it, the spiral glyph. You want to ask her more, but she disappears into the smoke. Days pass. The Spaniards claim the city. They tear down temples, build churches, fill canals with rubble. They rename streets, destroy idols, ban the language. But they never dismantle the spiral. They call it cursed, evil, a blasphemy. And yet they leave it, like a stain they can't scrub out of history. You return one evening years later, years that feel like centuries. The city is now a different skin. Spanish tiles, wooden doors, iron railings. But beneath it, the stone still breathes. The spiral remains half buried now, overgrown with weeds, pigeons roosting on its highest rung. Tourists pass it thinking it a ruin. Some take pictures. Some don't see it at all. But you walk the path still. Step by step, each skull is dimmer now, weather-worn, forgotten, but not by you. You touch the center stone. It's warm. You close your eyes. And for just a second you hear them all again. Moctezuma, the priests, the child, the gods, and yourself, all speaking the same word, remember. The years have slipped from your hands like water. You no longer count them, not in calendars or seasons. You count them in footsteps around the spiral. The city around you has changed names, changed gods, changed tongues. But the spiral endures stubborn as bone, silent as a prayer forgotten mid-sentence. No longer does it stand in a grand courtyard of white stone and golden light. Now it lurks behind a rusted iron gate in a neglected park, a curiosity whispered about by street vendors and drunk university students. You visit it still. The spiral is cracked now, weathered. Pigeons have left their droppings on sacred skulls. A vine curls through the eye socket of a once proud jaguar warrior. The outer mirror ring is shattered glass dust glittering in weeds. But the shape remains. A few of the skulls have collapsed. A portion of the base has sunk into the earth. But you walk it anyway, because you remember. And one day someone else does too. You arrive to find a woman, young, sharp-eyed, wearing a messenger bag, stuffed with notebooks. She's photographing the spiral from every angle, muttering measurements under her breath. You watch from a bench. She notices you eventually. Is this part of an ancient observatory, she asks. You smile, in a way. She crouches beside one skull, one with a glyph so faded it could be anything or nothing. She holds a piece of tracing paper over it and begins to sketch. You feel your chest tighten, because you know what she's drawing. It's the glyph for Allen movement. She sees your expression. You recognize it, you nod. It means change, collapse, creation. She raises an eyebrow. That's a lot for one word. You shrug. It's always been a lot. She keeps sketching. She returns every day. One morning she brings a fresh obsidian shard wrapped in cloth. She doesn't say why. She just walks to the center of the spiral and places it in a small hollow where a mirror once was. You don't speak. You don't need to. It gleams faintly in the morning light. You walk the spiral together. She asks about the pattern, the glyphs, the symbolism. You answer what you can. She takes notes. That evening, she posts a photo to the internet. A caption, "Uncatalogued ritual spiral structure behind La Merced Market. Aztec, unknown purpose." Some glyphs resemble solar calendars. No official plaques. Locals call it El Silencio. The image spreads. More people come. They take selfies. They light candles. They graffiti the outer stones. One draws a spiral in chalk, smiling. You help fix the broken fence. You don't mind. The spiral remembers, even if they don't. One afternoon, the woman sits beside you on the old bench. She holds a weathered codex, a copy of a memory. She points to a page. A man with a crown, a limp, a spiral, no name. Just a glyph beside him, Tlajpiaj. You laugh. You know what it means, she asks. You nod. The one who watches. She leans forward. Do you think he built it for himself? You don't answer at first. Then I think he built it for someone who would come later. Someone who would ask. She smiles. Maybe I'll be next. You smile back. Maybe you will. Later that night, as the city groans beneath streetlights and low sirens, you walk the spiral one last time. It's quiet. One skull, one from the inner ring, has been polished recently. You didn't do it. Someone else remembered. You place your hand on it. It's warm. You look up. The stars are scattered like obsidian dust across the sky. The spiral stretches beneath your feet. Time folds. And somewhere faintly, you hear Moctezuma's voice. Let them all belong. Rain falls softly over the city, not as a storm, but as a slow remembrance. Each drop feels deliberate, like the sky has decided to mourn. The spiral drinks it all, bone mirror and earth, now glistening in the silver hush of late evening. You stand at the outer ring, watching the water pool in the hollow eye sockets. They do not blink. They never have. But they seem to see more clearly in the rain. The woman is here again this time with a small group. Students, maybe, or believers. She leads them through the spiral like a guide at a museum that never asked to be curated. Her voice is calm, deliberate. This structure predates the fall of Tenochtitlan, she explains. It was expanded even as the city burned. Someone asks if it's a tomb. No, she says, kneeling beside a row of skulls. Not a tomb, a map. You feel a strange warmth behind your eyes. One of the younger students gestures toward a cracked glyph. This one looks like a jaguar, she says. Does that mean something? The woman nods. Jaguar was the symbol of warriors who fought at night, who walked between worlds. They write that down, hungry for meaning. Another asks, why spirals? Why not a pyramid like everything else? She pauses. Then, because pyramids point up, spirals go in. You watch the students touch the stones, their fingers brushing across ancient grooves, unaware they're tracing stories longer than dynasties. They leave offerings, marigolds, coins, a plastic-wrapped sandwich. You don't laugh, because the spiral accepts everything. Later, the plaza empties. Only the woman remains. She sits beside you in silence, both of you soaked in the rain. She pulls something from her bag, a replica of the glyph you saw long ago, the same one etched into a skull that might have been yours. Tlaj Piaj, the one who watches. She presses it into the soft mud at the spiral's edge. I think it's a name, she says, or maybe a title. You look at her. She smiles. I think it's you. You want to deny it, but instead you reach out and press your hand over the glyph. It's wet, warm, alive. The spiral doesn't argue. The next day, construction begins nearby a new subway tunnel. Engineers complain of structural complications. There's something strange under this quadrant, one says. Layers of stone and bone and something else. They pause the digging. The woman files paperwork. She begins a preservation effort. Petitions, articles, social media campaigns. Save the spiral trends briefly in Mexico City. One night, vandals spray paint over a row of skulls, pink cartoon hearts, neon stars, curse words. You're the first to arrive the next morning, but they've already been cleaned. Not by her, by someone else. You ask no questions. The spiral protects itself. Weeks pass. Tourists arrive more frequently now. Some leave flowers, some leave trash, some leave nothing at all. You sit under a tarp watching. You've lost track of the years again, but you never lose track of them. The skulls, their expressions, their order. They never change, except when they do. One evening, as clouds roll in like forgotten names, you notice a new addition. A skull, not bone, carved wood, polished, decorative. At first you frown, but then you see the glyph burned into its forehead, a spiral within a spiral. A student's offering, perhaps, or the woman's. You don't remove it, because it fits. It belongs. That night you dream again. You are walking the spiral. But now the skulls speak not in whispers, but in song. They sing names, stories, seasons, losses. You hear Moctezuma. He says nothing. He just places a hand on your shoulder and nods. You wake with mud under your nails. The wooden skull glows faintly in the moonlight. The spiral remembers. So do you. You no longer remember your own name, not because you've forgotten, but because you no longer need it. People come and go. The city groans through its new lives, megaphones instead of conch shells, exhaust fumes instead of copal neon signs, instead of painted glyphs. But in the center of it all, where no road leads and no tour bus stops, as the spiral persists. The world hurries. The spiral waits. You spend your days walking its curve, sometimes clockwise, sometimes not. It doesn't seem to mind. You whisper to the skulls now, not out of madness, but courtesy. You thank them. You check their balance. You brush the dust from their brows. You are not alone. More and more others arrive. Some seek explanations. Others peace. Some just stumble upon it after a bad breakup or a worse meal or heartbreak that cracks their ribs open like altar stones. They bring gifts, not hearts or gold, but memories. One man leaves a child's shoe. Another, a cassette tape with no label. A woman ties a torn photograph of her mother to a spike on the inner ring. None of these offerings make sense, and yet they do. Because the spiral doesn't require understanding, only presence. The woman with the notebooks has returned again, older now. She carries a binder thicker than any codex, full of interviews, field notes, half-translated prayers. She waves at you and begins replacing faded paper slips, left by visitors with laminated versions, preserving even the inexplicable. I dreamed of a lake filled with teeth. I saw my grandfather's smile in a skull. I came here by accident. I don't want to leave. She doesn't archive them by date. She arranges them in a spiral. One afternoon, you'll find her at the center staring at the ground. She's discovered something. A small slab hidden beneath a layer of moss and thyme. She scrapes gently, reveals a glyph. Not Aztec, not Maya, not Spanish, not anything in the books. It's a circle open on one end. Inside it, an eye, you touch it. It's smooth. You both look at each other. Say nothing. You feel it then. The spiral has changed again. Not visibly, not structurally, but something in its tone, its intention. It has stopped asking. Now it listens. You hear stories told aloud as visitors walk the path. One man confesses to a theft he never paid for. A child admits she hates her own name. A woman stands in the center and says, "I lied to my sister before she died." No one responds, except the spiral. Its silence wraps them like a shawl. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. You begin leaving notes yourself, not messages, not confessions, just moments, the way the light fell on her face. My father laughed like obsidian cracking. I am still here. One morning you wake to find the spiral surrounded by candles. Hundreds. No one claims them. The air smells of wax and orange peel. You walk the path. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has. You reach the center. You kneel. And from the depths of the spiral, quietly, clearly, you hear your own voice. But not from today. From years ago. From when you first arrived. It says, "What is this place?" And then, faintly, Moctezuma answers, "A place to remember what the gods forgot." You laugh. A short, dry thing. You rise. Behind you, someone else is already entering the spiral. You don't recognize them, but they look at the skulls like old friends. You nod and step aside. The days blur now, not because they're dull, but because they fold inward like petals of the same flower blooming endlessly from the same ancient root. The spiral has become a rhythm. You don't measure time by seasons anymore. You measure it by footprints. Today you find a child has left a drawing at the spiral's entrance. It's done in thick crayon, wrinkled and rain-stained, but still clear a swirling line of circles, each with a smiley face, and one in the middle with a crown. You feel a tightness in your throat. A priest once told you the gods didn't require comprehension, just recognition. This child in 6 colors of wax has done both. You tuck the drawing beneath a loose stone at the spiral's base. It will stay. You're sure of it. You begin your daily walk. At the 3rd curve, you find a woman kneeling beside a skull. She's humming a lullaby in a language that doesn't belong to the land, but the melody fits anyway. She looks up as you pass, nods, and continues singing. At the 7th curve, a man is sculpting something in clay, a replica of one of the spiral skulls, but it bears his own face. He's quiet, focused. You say nothing. At the 9th curve, you meet a group in quiet procession. They each carry a stone with a name carved in it, not their own, but someone they've lost. They place them at regular intervals. You watch them from a distance. No one tells them where to put the stones. The spiral guides them. That night, the wind howls through the city. You think of how it must have sounded on the Noche Triste, when the Spaniards fled the city under darkness and rain dropping gold into the lake, their footsteps muffled by sorrow and mud. That night, you dream of those dropped treasures, long sunken coins, necklaces, masks, all forming their own spiral beneath the water. A spiral of greed. This one is different. This one remembers pain. You wake to news a new dig has uncovered a burial site near the spiral. The skulls are arranged in a circle, not as offerings, but as a pattern. Archaeologists argue whether it's an accident or if someone was copying the spiral long ago. You don't argue, you know. That evening, the woman with the notebooks returns. She's holding a letter. She places it on the center stone and walks away. You wait until she's gone. You open it. The handwriting is new shaky. You read, "I used to think memory was a burden, but I see now it's the last shape we're allowed to choose. I leave mine here among yours." You fold it again. Place it inside a hollow skull, the one that always tilts slightly to the left, like it's listening. At dusk, you watch from your bench as the sun casts long shadows across the spiral. Each skull catches just a flicker of light, like a choir of lanterns remembering something too delicate to name. Someone plays a flute in the distance. The melody stumbles, hesitates, then recovers. You smile. At the final curve, a girl kneels beside a mirror fragment. She's writing her name into the dirt with a stick. You ask her softly why she shrugs. "So it knows I was here." You walk with her around the last ring, hand in hand. When you reach the center, she looks up at you and says, "Is this the middle of the world? You consider it." "No," you say. "But it's the place that remembers where the middle used to be." She nods like that makes perfect sense. You leave her there. She draws a spiral in the dust with her finger and hums. The gods have not returned, but the people have. And so the spiral grows not in size, but in meaning. And you're still here, watching, always. It rains the next 3 days. Not a gentle storybook rain, but a soaking one, the kind that turns markets into rivers and rooftops into drums. Most people stay home, but not you. You sit beside the spiral, wrapped in your woven cloak, watching the droplets carve clean paths down the faces of the skulls. Water pools in their sockets, runs from their grins, collects at the base, like the tears of the city itself. No one comes for a while. The spiral is yours again, but it doesn't feel lonely. It feels patient, like it's waiting for something or someone. On the 4th day, a man arrives. Young, tall, drenched. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't take photos. He simply walks to the spiral, removes his backpack, and unpacks books, notebooks, a laptop, a hand-drawn map of the city with a single line curling inward like a fossil. You watch from under your tarp as he kneels and begins to measure. He draws lines between skulls. He counts spaces. He writes nothing down. He simply remembers. You approach eventually wordlessly. He says, "It's a code." You raise an eyebrow. A frequency, he explains. "I think the spiral holds a pattern of time." You consider that. He continues, Moctezuma wasn't just building memory. He was building something that would loop. A message designed to be found again. And again. And again. You nod. Because of course he was. He points to a section of the spiral where the skulls are spaced slightly farther apart. "There," he says. "That's where the pause is. That's the breath before the spiral starts again." You smile. He understands more than most, but he still has a long walk ahead of him. That night, you return to the temple. It's mostly gone now, reduced to foundation stones and a few stubborn columns. But you remember it. Not from books, from before. You stand in the spot where Moctezuma once prayed. The spot where eclipses turned day into dread. The spot where fire met blood and blood met sky. The city lights below buzz faintly. Traffic rumbles like distant drums. But here on this sacred rock, you hear nothing but the hush of eternity. You close your eyes, and for a moment you're there again. The drums, the feathers, the prayers. The sky cracked open with comet light. Moctezuma barefoot whispering to a mirror. And then quietly you, at his side, always watching. You open your eyes and descend back to the spiral. You find the man asleep on a bench, his notes tucked under his arm. The skulls glisten in moonlight. A new offering lies at the base, an earring made of turquoise, impossibly old. You recognize it. It was Moctezuma's. You don't ask where he got it. You simply place it on the center stone, where it belongs. Tomorrow, more will come. Some will be tourists, some seekers, some skeptics. A few will think it's art. A few will know better. You'll be here. You always are. The spiral no longer needs to be explained. It remembers itself now. And so do you. There are days when the spiral feels quiet, not dead, not abandoned, just resting. You sit on your usual bench as a soft breeze moves through the plaza. The skulls are calm today. No cracked glyphs, no toppled mirrors, no new graffiti. Just the steady, ancient hush of things that have endured far too long to bother shouting. You think about time, not in years, in loops, because now as you walk the spiral once again, you notice something impossible. The skulls have begun to repeat. One in the second ring, cracked across the brow jaw, slightly crooked. You've seen it before. But not here. It once stood near the center long ago. You remember the glyph beneath it? 2 eyes, a serpent, and a mirror. It had vanished. You were sure of it. And yet, it's back. Or maybe it never left. Or maybe you're the one repeating. The woman with the notebooks is back too. Older now, a streak of silver in her hair, a cane. She moves slower, but still walks the spiral every week. Today she walks with a child. A girl 5, maybe 6, eyes wide and quiet. The woman calls her Ixchel. You walk behind them at a respectful distance, listening. This is the place where the stories are, the woman tells her. Ixchel asks, "Is this a graveyard?" The woman smiles. No, it's a voice. Ixchel looks puzzled, but it's full of skulls. Yes, the woman says, but they're not gone. They're still telling us things. The girl steps off the path and kneels beside a skull with a faded red spiral carved into the forehead. She reaches out, brushes it with her fingers. "It's warm," she says. You blink. That skull shouldn't be warm. But then again, neither should the stone beneath your feet, or the mirror fragment catching light, even though the sun is behind the clouds. The spiral is waking, not with anger, with awareness. You return at dusk to find flowers tucked between the ribs of the outermost curve. Wild marigolds, bundled herbs, corn husks tied with red string. These are not tourist offerings. These are old ways. Returned. You kneel beside them, fingers resting on the damp earth. From somewhere deep within the spiral, a breeze rises. It carries the smell of copal and the sound of flutes. You stand and see them. Ghosts, echoes. You don't know. They walk the spiral silent, dignified. Priests, warriors, children, even Moctezuma. They do not look at you, but you are among them, part of the loop now, forever. You look to the sky. A hawk circles overhead. The same shape, the same rhythm. Spiral. You wonder briefly if this is the secret of everything. Not beginning, not end. Just return, just memory, just walking the same circle until it becomes a spiral wider, deeper, richer. You sit beside the center again. It's changed. The stone at the heart has a new carving, a small, simple glyph, a foot, twisted slightly. Moctezuma's. You reach out, touch it, you whisper, "I'm still watching." The spiral answers with silence and understanding. It happens on a quiet morning so unremarkable that it almost slips past unnoticed. No rain, no drums, no new visitors. Just the hum of traffic in the distance, pigeons arguing over crumbs, and a single dog napping near the spiral's edge. And then, a sound. Faint, like bone tapping wood. You sit up straighter. It happens again. You rise, walk the spiral slowly. At the fourth turn, you stop. A skull has fallen, not from weather, not from decay, but from within. You crouch, reach for it. It's familiar, cracked on the right side, a glyph of fire etched along the jawline. You've walked past it for years. It shouldn't be here. It belonged near the center. And yet, it lies now in the dust, staring up, as if surprised to have been caught breathing. You lift it gently, and the earth beneath it crumbles just a bit, revealing something new. Stone, smooth, cool, untouched by sun or soot. Another layer, beneath the spiral. Your breath catches, you clear the debris, and find a carving. A spiral within a spiral, this time made not of skulls, but of stars. Celestial markers. Glyphs for Venus, for eclipses, for time cycles, older than conquest. A hidden layer of meaning. The spiral above built of memory. The spiral below built of cosmos. You sit beside the stone, letting the weight of the discovery settle on your spine. Moctezuma didn't just map his world. He mapped the unseen. The spiral was never just for the gods. It was about the gods, and about what they feared. Oblivion. The woman with the cane arrives later, breathless. You show her the stone. She stares for a long time. "I've seen this glyph before," she whispers. "In a codex. One they said was a forgery." You smile. It wasn't. She reaches out and touches it. The air shifts. The dog at the spiral's edge lifts its head. The wind kicks up dust in a slow circular motion. You both look up. Above, the clouds move not randomly, but with direction, forming faintly a spiral in the sky. It lasts only seconds. But you see it. She does too. Neither of you speak. Because what is there to say? You walk the spiral again, together. As you do, you notice more changes. Some skulls you remember are missing. Others you've never seen are present. You whisper names to them. They do not reply, but they seem to listen. At the final curve, you find a child's drawing again. A new one. Crayon lines spiraling inward, ending in a dot. In the corner, a name. Ixchel. You turn. The child from before, grown now. She stands at the spiral's edge, hand in hand with her mother. They nod at you, then begin their own walk. As they pass you, you hear her whisper, "I want to be the one who watches." You feel your knees weaken, not from sorrow, from awe. You look to the stone at the center again, and find your name carved beside Moctezuma's foot glyph, not in your handwriting, but unmistakably yours. The spiral remembers you, and always has. It begins with a tremor, not loud, not dramatic, just a gentle vibration beneath your feet, like the city shifting in its sleep. You're standing at the spiral's edge, watching pigeons scatter from the rooftops when you feel its stone breathing. You crouch, palm to the ground, stillness again. But you know the truth. Something is waking up. Later that afternoon, tourists arrive. A family from Michoacan, a woman with a camera lens longer than her arm, a teenager with earbuds in, staring down the spiral while chewing gum. They sense nothing. But the spiral does. The skulls are whispering again. You walk slowly, listening. Snatches of thought drift through the air, not full sentences, just fragments the mirror cracked. He limped toward the sun. I dreamed I was Maze, and it all curved inward. You stop at the seventh curve. A new skull has been added. It doesn't belong. You know every bone here, every glyph, every nick and scorch mark. But this one is too smooth, too white, too fresh. No one speaks of it. No one claims it. It is simply there. At dusk, you return with a flashlight and curiosity. You kneel beside the new skull, scanning it with care. They're etched so lightly it's almost invisible as a date. Not ancient, not colonial, but tomorrow. You blink. You shine the light again. Same date. You look around. No one. The spiral groans softly, as if stretching. At the center, the mirrors glimmer in the low light. You walk toward them expecting your reflection. Instead, you see someone else. A face not your own. Not Moctezuma. A child, maybe. Or someone who hasn't been born yet. They're looking back at you confused. Then, smiling. You reach toward the glass, but the image blurs. When it clears again, it's you. Only not older. Your face lined, your eyes deeper like tunnels beneath a temple. The spiral is bending time, not metaphorically. Actually, it's no longer just a memory machine. It's a corridor, a hallway, a prayer whispered forward and backward all at once. You back away slowly, your heart pounding. The woman with the cane meets you halfway. I saw it too, she says. Last year, a reflection of my mother. From when she was 10, you sit beside her breathing hard. What is it you ask? She doesn't answer. She just stares into the spiral center. Later that night, as the plaza empties, you kneel at the base again and press your palm to the stone. You feel not heat, not cold, but pulse. The spiral is alive, or becoming so. You understand now. Moctezuma wasn't just trying to build something the gods couldn't ignore. He was trying to build something the future couldn't forget. A message sent not in ink, not in smoke, but in shape. Tomorrow they will begin new excavations nearby. A metro line expansion. You already know what they'll find. Not another temple. Not another grave. But another spiral. Older. Deeper. You sit with that thought until the stars come out. Above you, Orion tilts slightly west. A hawk passes silhouetted in moonlight. You walk the spiral again, this time backward. When you reach the first curve, you look up. A boy is watching you from across the plaza. His left foot drags slightly. You stare. He smiles and disappears around the corner. The next day, everything feels off-center. Not wrong, just tilted as if the city has leaned ever so slightly toward remembering more than it should. You return to the spiral before sunrise. The plaza is empty. The shadows are long and tender. The skulls wear a thin sheen of dew, like a breath clinging to them from another world. You kneel at the outer curve. Something has shifted. You walk the spiral slow and deliberate. The skulls whisper again, but now it's not just fragments. It's questions. What shape did your memory take? Where did your name go when no one said it aloud? Would you build a monument to your forgetting? At the center, a mirror has cracked, not shattered, but cracked in a perfect arc. It catches the early sun and casts a soft beam across your face. You don't look away. You look through. And what you see is impossible. The spiral stretching, not across the plaza, but through other spirals, temples buried beneath churches, forgotten shrines inside shopping malls, graffiti spirals drawn on alley walls by children who never heard of Moctezuma. It's all one spiral, curving through time, through memory, through you. You step back dizzy. The woman with the cane arrives. Today she carries no books, just a folded scrap of paper. She hands it to you. You unfold it slowly. One line handwritten. The spiral doesn't end. It hands itself off. You look up. She's already walking away. You place the note at the center. It flutters once, then stills. That afternoon, the digging begins 3 blocks east. They find something within hours. Skulls. Arranged not in a pile, but in a curve. The papers report it as another Aztec altar. But you know. You visit it that night. No lights, no signs, no guards yet. Just dirt, stone, and bone. You run your fingers along the pattern. Smaller. Simpler, like the first version of the spiral. Or the last. You return to the original. Sit at the center. And feel it humming beneath you. Not loudly. Just enough to remind you that it's still writing. That you're still inside the sentence. Tomorrow someone new will arrive. You don't know who. A child. A pilgrim. A scholar. A skeptic. They'll walk the spiral. They'll feel the air change. They'll wonder why this shape follows them home, appears in their dreams, shows up in steam on the shower wall. And then someday they'll build their own. And they'll say, it came from a memory I couldn't name. Just like you did. Just like Moctezuma did. You place your hand on the center stone. For the last time, you whisper, here, take it. And the spiral doesn't answer, because it doesn't need to. It knows. The morning is gentle sunlight poured thin over rooftops, breeze, carrying the quiet rustle of market stalls not yet opened. You arrive before the others, before the footsteps, before the questions. You walk the spiral one final time. You don't count the curves anymore. You don't trace the glyphs. You simply feel the way the air bends around each corner, the way the light flickers just slightly between one skull and the next. You don't rush. You never have to rush inside a memory. At the center, you sit cross-legged. The stone beneath you is warm. There are no tourists today. No historians. No skeptics with clipboards and plastic gloves. Only you and the spiral. You close your eyes, and the city falls away. You're on the steps of the Templo Mayor. You're kneeling beside a boy with a limp building a tower of pebbles while the stars blink overhead like slow-turning gears. You're standing beside a man with fire in his voice and sorrow in his bones, lifting a mirror to a prisoner who doesn't understand what he's being shown. You're watching flames rise over a lake, and you're listening to skulls whisper names that haven't been spoken aloud in 500 years. You are Moctezuma. You are the flayed priest. You are the child who offered a drawing. You are the stranger who walked too far and couldn't leave. And still you are you. You, the watcher, the one who remembers what the gods forgot. You open your eyes. A girl stands at the edge of the spiral. She's watching you not with fear, not with awe, with recognition. She walks forward, barefoot, careful. She sits beside you. You don't speak. She doesn't need you to. The spiral hums around you both like a breath held for too long. You rise. She stays. That's how it works. The spiral doesn't end. It hands itself off. You walk away, your steps quiet. You don't look back. Because you know she'll walk it now. She'll leave her own offering. She'll find her own mirror. And one day she'll meet someone else at the center and hand it off again. The spiral continues. The skulls remain. The memory endures. And the gods, they still watch. From behind the clouds, from inside the stone, from the black glass of the obsidian mirror. They remember now, because you made them.